NVIDIA 20 series. Ray tracing launched. It was essentially a beta feature. Slightly playable on more expensive GPUs. You know what I mean? Definitely beta feature. 30 series launches. RT, still essentially a beta feature, though you do get a little bit more performance out of the 30 series cards. Obviously 3090 and 3090 Ti definitely gave you a lot more power for that at an extremely high cost. We're looking at $1,500 to $2,000 for those GPUs. Obviously I had a 3080 10 gig. It wasn't really that great of an experience. Like, it was actually a pretty poor experience for ray tracing for that GPU level. 40 series. Okay, now we're talking. Ray tracing is starting to feel more like an actual usable feature on cards as low as 4070. Like 4070 was the first time I was like, okay, this is actually playable at, you know, fairly decent compromise using extreme level of DLSS and, you know, basically playing at like 1080p or lower to actually get a playable experience with DLSS and ray tracing enabled. But your higher end cards, like a 4080 Super that I bought, that was a more enjoyable experience. A lot less compromise, definitely a little bit better experience, and DLSS starting to look better with ray reconstruction techniques from DLSS 3.5. Then the 50 series launches, and we essentially stay pretty much right at that same power level, but now ray tracing is more of a less of a beta feature and more of like, okay, developers are starting to take it seriously. We're starting to get more software. You know, 30 series, we didn't have a lot of software. 20 series, we definitely didn't have a lot of software. 40 series, we started getting more toward the end. Games that actually have to use ray tracing to even be played. So we're talking about like Indiana Jones. We're talking, you know, Avatar. We're talking Star Wars Outlaws. So we're starting to get games that actually need ray tracing. I've never really been a big, massive fan of DLSS. The issues that always stood out that, you know, Digital Foundry and others have talked about just recently with their new comparisons to DLSS4 transformer model and to the new FSR4, they've always pointed this stuff out to you guys. And I've seen this and said this, and nobody's ever listened. They all just, you know, take it as like matter of fact that DLSS is the best. And I've just always been like, hey, it doesn't really sit super well with me. Like, I can use it, like obviously it's usable and it will do what it's supposed to do, but I just never liked what it would do, the drastic change to my image quality that I would take using DLSS. So it kind of turned me off from that technology pretty quickly. Now, let's jump over to the other side. And I know I said this a while back, a long time ago. I said, when AMD brings the features, then that's fine. Because I had made that decision to switch to AMD a while back. I literally made that decision. I was like, look, AMD is going to be my daily driver. When AMD brings ray tracing, then it'll matter to me. And I literally said that. I'm pretty sure I've said that a couple of times, that when ray tracing is a viable option, AMD will have an answer for it. When upscaling is absolutely necessary, AMD will have an answer for that. They do. FSR4 looks significantly, and remember, this is my opinion. You don't have to freak out at me in the comment section. This is my opinion after playing the games. To be fair, most of the games that I've played are Sony games. PlayStation and AMD are in cahoots making at Project Amethyst, their upscaling technology, that's machine learning. So I'm finding it quite interesting just how incredible FSR4 looks in these Sony titles like Horizon, Spider-Man, Ratchet and Clank. It's it's incredibly good. Like, I was sitting there on Horizon flipping back and forth between performance level FSR and native, and I was absolutely blown away. Like, obviously native still looks better, but like it really is kind of splitting hairs. You know, everything that they used to say that DLSS was, guys, DLSS stripped out so much technology or so much visual quality information that it was like, what the heck is going on? Finally, DLSS 4 transformer model has been able to bring that back. And it's like, I find it interesting that so many people, they get so hung up on these upscalers and stuff. Like, they've never really stood out as, like, for me, going out and buying $1,000 GPU, the last thing I want to hear is you have to use an upscaler. That's the last thing I want to hear for $1,000 GPU. That's why I went with the 7900 XTX over the 4080 Super, because I was like, okay, I'm going to be playing on 3440 by 1440p. I would much rather have that extra VRAM and, you know, the wider bus and all of that stuff. Like, I would prefer that over the 256-bit bus and 16 gigs of VRAM that the 4080 Super has, for a little bit better ray tracing experience and DLSS, which I don't necessarily like the way it looks, so I don't use it. And I'm not going to be playing on 4K, so I absolutely don't need that upscaler. To me, it just seemed like a no-brainer that, okay, yeah, AMD is definitely the better choice. It's got the better usable feature set for me in this generation. But now we're to the 9000 series. Now we're to the 9070 XT and 9070. And the new 50 series from NVIDIA. And as you can see from both manufacturers, neither one of them have really decided to try to push that power level further. No, neither one of them. I mean, AMD has come in, and this 9070 XT is pretty close to, I get the same feeling I had closer to the 90 or to the 7900 XT, with some games that will easily, you know, meet or exceed the 7900 XTX. That's not very often, but it is doable. Like there are games that you can actually get a little bit better performance, and so that's interesting. I find that quite interesting. Definitely not at a place though that I would recommend getting rid of a 7900 XTX. And maybe even a 7900 XT for that matter. If you've got that card and you're happy with it, I think that I see no reason to upgrade. I don't really necessarily see a reason to upgrade, but, and see, this is the thing, okay? Because we're all gamers. We all want that new, shiny, flashy technology. I think that some people would be able to switch or side grade to a 9070 XT and be happy. Now, it would be a lot harder on the NVIDIA side to justify a side grade this generation, just due to the fact that, like, the 5070 Ti and the 4080 are so close that it doesn't make sense unless you want that multi-frame gen. And so here's the thing with the multi-frame gen on the NVIDIA side, it's hit and miss still. Like, it's still hit and miss. And the same with a frame generation over on the AMD side. But if you look at the way it performs, like, for some reason, even using DLSS upscaling and FSR's frame generation, it's still a better match. It's still a better match. Like, I do not like the extra stripped detail that the NVIDIA frame generation brings to games. It's just so nerve-wracking that like it's like every time you use a new feature on the NVIDIA set, it takes away something else that's equally important to me. And that's just the way it's always been. And I can see that. Like, I'm super hypersensitive to seeing my visual quality. Like, that's the one thing that I notice the most. The visual quality, I'm like, oh my gosh, like that there is like my bread and butter when it comes to games. Performance can be anywhere from 35 to 120 frames, and that matters less to me most of the time than my visual quality while I'm playing a game. So when I turn on DLSS, I notice it immediately. If I'm looking at a game, so okay, let me be fair. If I go into a game and it's already set to DLSS, I would be none the wiser until I turned it off and looked at it without it. So the way I would get in there and look at the game initially with DLSS, that would be like, okay, like, then I would have to like be like, okay, this looks good or that looks good, and then that. But once I see that game at native resolution, it's all over. Like DLSS has never been able to get me close enough to that until the transformer model came out, and you start getting that detail back. That detail is significantly more important than the playability on a lot of the type of games that I play, because most of the games I play are single player games. So there's a lot more wiggle room performance-wise than there is visual-wise. Visual-wise has to be number one when it comes to single-player games for me. And that's always going to be the case. That's always going to be the case. And finally, DLSS4 transformer model actually bridges that gap and makes upscaling a lot more usable and feasible on the NVIDIA GPUs now. It's just, it was just a matter of time, and it's finally usable for me. But when I look at what the experience, is between, using or having to use like DLSS or like the way the DLSS4 performed on like the 4070 Super, like you would lose a little bit of performance. And just like FSR4, you're losing performance going to FSR4 over what we're losing with just regular FSR3. And most of the time, if I had to play at 4K and I had to use FSR3, obviously I'd be using it in the quality mode first, and if that could get me over 60 frames a second, that was satisfactory. But going down to like performance mode in a lot of these, like I've sat here for the last few months, since I got that PlayStation 5 Pro, really looking at things on DLSS, looking at things on FSR, looking at things just on the PlayStation 5 Pro in general, and trying to kind of get a sense of why the community feels so strongly about these upscaling technologies. Why is the community so hell-bent and so headstrong on propping up these technologies, even knowing that they have to use like highly compromised settings sometimes to actually be able to play at 4K? And I keep asking myself that. I'm like, why would someone spend $1,500 on a 60 series NVIDIA pre-built? Why would anybody go buy a 4060 pre-built or a 4060 Ti pre-built just to come home, hook it up to a 4K screen, and run performance level DLSS to try to get a close enough 60 FPS experience over a $700 PlayStation 5 Pro that has significantly better graphics and a more stable 60 FPS and looks better on a 4K screen that's more tuned to try to keep a lot of the visual features? I'm like, why would anybody do that? Like, that just sounds dumb to me. And after my experience with like a 3060 Ti and just coming into PC and feeling that was the last time that I will ever feel that I would ever like embarrass myself over something stupid like that. Like, I was so embarrassed that, arguing with the console fanboys about a 3060 Ti being a better experience when it literally is the same damn thing. It's literally the same damn thing. I'm just an idiot for spending 3 times as much on that because I didn't know what I was doing, or because I thought that I was trying to be like smart and super blah 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 and buy a PC. Like, dude, I'll never fall for the NVIDIA crap again. Like, that embarrassed the shit out of me so bad. Buying that stupid 3060 Ti PC, man. I literally just, I look back at those early days of PC gaming and I get mad. I get mad because the hype surrounding the NVIDIA brand is so strong and so powerful that so many people are just out there wasting money. They're out there like spending all that money on these pre-builds for these 60 series PCs, and because they got an NVIDIA tag on them, they sell them for $300 more than anything AMD. Like, you could go out and buy anything AMD with significantly better GPUs in them for less money, and people overhype NVIDIA so much that people are just so drawn to buying that garbage level freaking pre-built experience that like I take it personally. I do take it personally because I would much rather somebody get a good experience their first time out with PC instead of getting sucked right into the fold and being like, oh man, and this sucks. I don't want to see people have to make the same choice that I did to buy a pre-built and then a month later end up having to buy a new GPU to add to that cost when they could have just got that level of performance right then and there without having to go through the hassle of, being scalped or anything like that. Like, they could have just bought, a 6800 XT. Like, I swear the price for 6800 XT pre-built was maybe $100 more, and that was a significantly better card. A significantly better card. 16 gigs of VRAM. I was like, oh my gosh, man. Like, I really did. I felt so dumb at that point. And so when I get to the new generation 9070 XT versus the 5070 Ti, and I look at this experience. Now, obviously, I paid significantly more money for the NVIDIA because I got the AMD card for free. And that was awesome. I'm super grateful for that. After they see how I make content for this, they'll probably never send me another free GPU again, but whatever. I look at this experience, guys, between a 9070 XT, 5070 Ti, and it's so close. Like, it's so freaking close that it's like, wow, if I was only on AMD, and say I'd bought in, like to the 6800 XT. Say I'd bought in, say that was my first pre-built, was that 6800 XT, because there was a 3060 Ti and then there was a 6800 XT. I listened to everybody tell me how trash AMD was, and so I didn't even consider it. I didn't even consider AMD when I bought that first PC. But say I would have went the other way. Say I would have been a little bit more wiser. Say I would have been a little bit more, just thinking a little bit more in terms of like VRAM allotment, future gaming. Just say that just for the heck of it, I made a separate turn and I bought a 6800 XT. Okay? Well, that 6800 XT, if I look across the fence and at the new generation of AMD GPUs, 7800 XT, that was like $500 GPU, guys. $500. I'd have been like, okay, maybe I upgrade, maybe I don't. I'm looking at the reviews, everything's saying, oh, they're pretty much the same. So I'm like, all right, maybe I just stick with my 6800 XT. It's doing what I needed to do. I'm pretty happy with that. You know what I mean? Or maybe I see like the 7900 XTX or the XT, and I'm like, dang, dude, I really enjoyed my AMD, experience. I didn't know what to think. This was my first time. And then I decide, okay, maybe I'm going for the 7900 XTX. Or, as a regular honest gamer, I would have still had the 6800 XT, my PlayStation 5, my Xbox Series X. I would have still had a significantly better experience no matter what on the 6800 XT over those two consoles. Maybe it would have never been an issue for me to upgrade yet. Maybe I would still be there happy. Maybe all that money that I've spent on GPUs and everything else would have went right into buying hard drives for more storage, for more games, to be more happy. You never know. Things could have turned out so many different ways had I just went Team Red in the first place. Maybe I would have got into AMD. Maybe I would have had the buggy busted drivers and I would have been mad, and I would have just went over and bought NVIDIA. And then, you know what I mean? There's so many different outcomes that could have happened, but because I chose NVIDIA first, it forcefully pushed me into the arms of AMD, like forcefully. Like I was so mortified with my pre-built the size of that case, not knowing, not being able to upgrade to a specific GPU, I was mad. Okay, and so I took matters into my own hand and I built my own PC with a big enough case to where I can fit any GPU I ever would need into this case. Like I made that, like that was I need the biggest freaking case I can get type deal, but not too big. You know, and I built that PC and I've put multiple cards in there now. Multiple. And I'm just like, I keep coming back to the same thing, that these cards do not change enough throughout the last couple of generations that I've been PC gaming to where it even makes sense that people go nuts over this stuff and freak out and scalp GPUs. Like, what are they doing? Like, the biggest deal with this generation is NVIDIA took a couple $100 off the 4080 Super power and then left it to AIBs to charge you whatever they want. You know what I mean? That's the biggest thing that happened. AMD brings out pretty much the same power we already got, charges $600, pretty much what those cards were selling for after they had gotten discounts on the 7900 XTX and XT. They're selling you the same card, but again, leaving it up to AIBs to make more money on. So at the end of the day, going with AMD is probably one of the best decisions I ever made for my sanity in PC gaming, because I click with it. And it feels great. Like I get everything I need. And right now, right when ray tracing and upscaling, well, ray tracing is starting to become more of a necessary feature going forward for games, AMD finally brought enough ray tracing power for me to enjoy that experience. And also brings out FSR4, which is a significantly better version of FSR3, to be able to give me a playable experience with that ray tracing. So like I said, when it's actually necessary for ray tracing, AMD will have an answer. When it's actually necessary to have to use upscaling, AMD will have an answer. And that's the way I've looked at it. When AMD feels it's necessary for me to have a feature, they'll bring it. They'll bring it. Trust and believe. NVIDIA will always, in my opinion, be the ones that sell you, because I'm pretty sure ray tracing was going to come to gaming. I think NVIDIA just got out in front of it and was like, all right, let's see, what can we make work? What can we make work? What can we make work every generation? And then sold you that as a beta feature for significantly more money. And then, yeah, I can't believe, I've been playing games for a long time, guys, and I've seen some real shenanigans in my lifetime. And this is by far the biggest okie doke I think we've ever experienced in gaming was ray tracing, especially at the 20 series cards. That was just a joke. That was like, wow, you guys are dumb. The 30 series, I was like, okay, man, this isn't very good. Like nobody on the bottom stack can play it. 40 series is when they actually were I'm kind of curious if 50, 60 bros are actually going to finally get to experience ray tracing. I mean, it still might be a full-on freaking scam. You know, you need good performant ray tracing at a freaking lower level so that people can actually experience that. Especially if games are going to start forcing it in there. You have to have performant hardware for that to even be a viable option. And I think, I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe we're there this generation, maybe we're not, but it's definitely closer. I can assure you that. It started getting good on the 40 series, and it was usable on a 4070 Super. So, yeah, that card's biggest problem was VRAM. Like always, there's always some catch with NVIDIA. There's always some catch. You know, you always have to manage those expectations. You can never just buy something with confidence and feel like, yeah, this is gonna be good. You always got a second question and everything. And then that bleeds over into AMD and it's like, look, they're like, oh, look, we make you good GPU, man. I don't know, guys. So yeah, I've seen some of the comments today and I'm like, this reoccurring thing, upscaling and ray tracing isn't good, but then when the AMD brings it out, it's good. Yeah. They put in more work and they brought you an actual usable feature that's actually pretty dang good and it works. I didn't need it before, but I definitely might need it now going forward. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's crazy. And to be fair, ray tracing was just fine on 7000 series cards, and actually usable too. And well, at least where I was at with the 7900 XTX, absolutely usable. And FSR4, while not perfect, was still usable. So, all right, my friends, if you guys like this content, do not forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.
Ghana wanted to see you. Don't know why, though.
Unless you wish to breathe toxins. Poison takes to the air now.